Clocking lines of anything instructions is a direct line link. You have to understand how to process that in all position location or systems. Now you have to understand our grounds, our powers, atmospheres, and highways, and understand the 5 metric meters and scales of communication what comes into that track calculation setting. Coming into the metric, coming into the scale, coming into the balance, coming into the atmospheres, coming into the highways. That's the 5 line provisions to your track calculation system, all through cerebral cortex, line division, location setting, syntax, cortex, codex, line direct signals into mystical cortex to set position location travels. All right, so the more you come into that tractions, this is where we come to all levels. Your test is basically in that position. We have that in communication lines on all Wednesday. That puts all communication setting line at high location of system. Processing communication setting. So basically understanding we did a very powerful live and set calculation setting to know exactly how to basically see yourself 12 steps ahead of the game and no steps back. How do we come into that set locations? Not only that, but you have to understand the head space to the mind space of empty space. That process all communication setting. So if there's nothing perceiving, guys, please pay attention to this. If there's nothing perceived through consciousness, it's just you. Which means it's not about bringing things in, because now you're bringing things in. You don't need to bring things in if it's already set in provision of clocking. And this is where it formulates and correlates in tractions through direct signals, how to see it through Doctor Strange, through a clocking system. 1 setting, 2 tractions, 3 set correlations. 3 clocking systems, right? Flux over screen, flux over panel, flux over center communication. All through clocking, right? Setting lines of course centers, lines set position of grounds, powers, atmospheres, and highways in traction. All through clocking, right? Now, if I do this, we have a different clocking system, all through grounds. Okay? And if I do this, remember, it's always in a 4-track location. Okay? If I do this, it's all similar location of settings and grounds. Okay? Oh, we lost signal. There it is. 3 tractions and 4 settings. 4 platform lines of 0, position of 1, 2, and 3 track location. Okay? Now we come into line directions and setting. Okay? Then we come into platforms and set position location setting through sonar. Okay? Then we set up the planetary surface, because we're out of the highways, into track locations. 3 planets, all through tractions. Setting line direct signals into modification ground lines of symbolism. Process calculation lines, directing lines of set position of center and communication system to track locations. Directing lines across line signals, line communication system, all through track location, and measure and scale and balance. Everything I do is balance. Everything I do in track lines is balance. Everything I do is already in balance. Communication of scale and metric meters and communication setting to its atmospheres, highways, and tractions. It's all done through equation. It's all done. So there's nothing to measure. There's nothing to scale. What I'm talking to you, line, is all positions of what? Observation. I'm not setting the intent, guys. I'm not changing anything. I'm going back to your division of where you are in clocking. So where I am doesn't exist. There's no existence until I bring it into existing of its existence, because it's already in that formation. So nothing is existing of its existence because there's nothing to perceive through consciousness. Okay? You got to understand how to use that through the computer adaptation that you are, through your computed system location, your binaries, understand that, how to communicate through that setting through its algorithm. Process communication, high interference. This where it gets really interesting in tractions and direct signals, okay? All right, so we got the metric. That's the metric, all right? We got the scale, okay? And we got the balance. There's 3, right? There's the metric, scale, balance, right? So you're looking at the ruler. There's the ruler, okay? Then you're looking at the scale. The set position. There's the scale. Metric, scale. See it? Now we get into the balance. The balance is the all-line communication of Fibonacci of 6 and 9. That's how it's set up. And the metric core centers line direct signals and the line position locations of the mind and conceptual location interfacing. Position of the ruler, scale, and balance. Now, once you get into balance, you come into the atmospheres through weather panels, grounds, powers, and atmospheres, right? Then that position locations, you come into your highways. Your highway track location is your flyway communication system and track locations. That's how it calculates and modifies in your 5th element. So that's how it's set up. Metric, scale, and balance. All right. Now, this is what you come into positions of. It doesn't matter how many times you get in a track location of settings, right? Pyramid. Okay. Now, if I want to add a Y screen, there's a Y screen. Okay? So I'm changing modifications of travel and direct signals. It doesn't matter where you plot it to its division location to its system, all through tractions, right? Anything in communication system, all through scales, and its balance communication setting, all through measure. All right, so it's basically understand that if I want to change the teleportation system, all through geometric, geological, and the geographical system, you have to understand it through highway interactions. This is the highways. These are the highways, guys. All through metric meters, scales, and balance in your highways communication system. Okay, that's a highway. This is the highway, right? You see that, right? Then you see it in line screen adaptations of process communications and files. Okay? So it's really interesting how you go in position of going forward in line calculation setting in 3 track lines of division location of 4 in position lines of setting of 6 in track location of same directions in set calculations. All right? So I'm just showing you through scales and balance of communication. Everything is balance. Center 0 balance, center grounds of balance. Right? Sets position here and all setting lines of 2 panels of communication. There's the structure, there's the design. All through geometric, right? So once you get in the ruler, once you get in the scale, once you get in the balance, then you come into position locations, how to use it through the Fibonacci. Okay? Then you come into your platforms. Okay? Ground center lines of 1, 2, and position. There's 3 tractions there, right? Here is the teleportation vessel. Okay? Now, you see it on the grounds, but this is what you're looking at in track location. There's the vessel, right? So scale lines, screen lines, adaptation of surface and track locations. Okay? Setting lines of tubing. There's the tubing and track location. Process lines of tubing and screen lines adaptations of panels. Process lines of platforms and 0 correlation lines of tractions in setting. All right? Scales, communication, ground lines of surface, black holes, and 3 track location lines of 6 over 8. Setting coordinate centers and line positional case to its system. All through tractions, right? Oh, it's not there. We took it out. So we got to do it again in travel because it's going too fast. Time positions. Set calculations, right? Directing lines into highways. There's the highways. Okay? So everything that you create is creating its own anomaly. It's creating this geometric, geological, geographical, and its geometric system, right? But you have to understand the metric, the scale, the balance, okay? In position the atmospheres to its highway. And once you get into the highway, you come into higher plantation, which is your system, which is all of us platforms that puts you into your system of your planets. All right. So understanding the ruler, okay, the divots of the ruler, okay, the ruler itself, right, has platforms, guys. Okay, it has to have everything of platforms of travel. Okay, platforms of travel in the same direction and set position. Okay, and then you do this. Look at this. Changes all lines of graph communication, all levels. Process communication lines of high center of variance, location human residence. Process symbolism, location attractions, and division. Now we change the course and direct signals modification. Okay, sets lines, course center line of center communications into its primer. Center course system of travels. Set calculation lines of 0, 0, 0, and 0 and 4 settings. And set position, right? Process calculation high direct signals, process lines 1, process lines of 2. Electrical line communication setting in line rotations into all levels, Skynet, sky grid, sky panels, and line rotation surface and track location. Okay? We change it again. Different directions and signal. Okay? Now, mechanism lines of force puts all communication system, all lines of metric, position of scale, and position of balance and traction. So 3 settings. Process communication, bring in the ruler of the track location longitude and latitude to its vessel of communication. There's a teleportation vessel. Done by equation. Okay? It's amazing when you do it through all communication lines, all through perspective. Process lines of perspective are 1, 3, 7, and 8 tractions of division. Core lines, webbing system, and line correlation setting and clocking. Process line direct signals into 0, 0, 0, and 4 communications. 8 lines of tractions and directions, right? Now we go into the line signals. This process communicates in setting and tractions. Okay? All right, so we process lines of 2, process lines of 4, process lines of 8, and process lines of 6 in travel. Okay, cross-line settings into tubing and 2 track location lines of provisions and 1 cycle line's highest interference. All right, so we changed that communication setting, all realms, and set position location to its portals. Portal communication lines of high centers of 0, process communication high center location in kaleidoscope, in communication setting of Tango, and Foxtrot communication system, all through tractions. Mechanism high force, directing line communication setting and process calculations. All right, directing line symbolism, cross lines of platforms. Now we cross the symbolism. Flywheel tractions, high correlates and setting of 4-line division into a black hole and central communication setting opens all signals in panel communication system and travel. All through tractions. Directing line course centers, line direct signals and calculation system. All through mechanism. All right. So once you get into the metrics and once you get into the scale, then you get into the balance, then you get into the atmospheres. Are you working with the atmosphere, stratosphere, bio, branium, or lines? But if you're not perceiving anything, let's just bring in line communication. Let's just bring in the wall circuits, 2 panels, and 4 communications. That's all I'm bringing in, nothing else. I'm not bringing anything else. I'm not perceiving anything through consciousness. So as soon as I add equations, I'm bringing electrical grids and 4 settings of 4 set position. Oh, now I'm going to bring the wall sequence, line condition setting, and floor line communications. Now I'm bringing the ground line surface location, road graph communication setting, all through tractions, all through setting. Everything that you perceive is what happens through attractions of clocking. All right. So again, we go into that position locations, the metric scales, and it doesn't matter. It's all levels. It's longitude and it's latitude. Okay. Knowing the bandwidth and set position that you're doing through tractions. All right. So you're always in metric, you're always in scale, and you're always in balance every single time. Now, once you get into the balance, you go through the higher levels of platforms of communication. Right. Once you get into that, you come into your position out of the atmospheres into the highways and line screen adaptations into your computer operation system that puts everything through your clouds, your e-clouds, your iClouds, or your center cloud communication system, and all through tractions, all through division location to set calculations. Okay? All right. So it's very important you understand that. So position lines, metric, scale, balance. Now you put that together like this. Look at this. This is the teleportation vessel. There it is. Done. Right? So it's got its metrics grounds, it's got its powers, and it's got its atmosphere. So 3 tractions. In set position. Okay? Really look at this in tractions. There it is, teleportation. Very powerful stuff, right? 4 correlation lines of 3 line cycles in position of crop circles, directing signals and modification grounds, assembly location setting attractions. Directing communication lines of flux over line into all lines of Y screen location setting and inhibitors. Process calculation lines, electrical line communication, set position. Okay? So it's very powerful how to connect through clocking. All right? Clocking lines of 0, clocking lines of grounds, clocking lines of symbolism. Oh, there's the teleportation. Oh, process communication, high settings of travel. All right? We lost symbolism, process communication. There it is in tractions, right? Let's change it in course centers, line direct signals, and a 45 communication. Okay? Then what I'm doing is I'm adding frames of sonar, bringing lines, communication setting, and perceiving everything through consciousness, of bringing track lines, high direct lines, and modification ground lines, the simplification setting that metrics its mirrors and scales communication setting and balance that changes everything through its atmospheres and line position locations highways that retriangulates position of its program and set position location setting to travel. Okay? So I'm constantly changing. So, like I said, just because you have anything in ground lines doesn't mean it's in position until you perceive it through intent. Change the intent, change the influence, changes all levels of the mind alteration system that automatically changes your clocking system. Right away in tractions. Set position of the sun and the moon. You see the sun in this, right? Here's the sun and the moon, right? Together, right? Set position location, here's the sun and the moon. And another tractions. Right? Here's the sun and the moon in 3 settings and 3 set positions. Okay? Here's the sun and the moon in 3 track locations in set position. Right? It's all line direct signals and triangulation. All direct lines and triangulation and teleportations. All lines of calculation. Okay? How you see the sun and the moon. Right? It's all through clocking. Clocking screen, clocking lines, grounds, communication lines, inhibitors over line, direct signals, modification, ground, communication, high position locations. Put your inline core centers into a cubical screen and direct signals and cubical line ground communication. Okay, platforms, setting lines of tractions. Panels, setting lines of communication. Okay, directing core centers in platforms A, platforms C, platforms D, and platforms E and track location. All right, setting position location of tubing, cross line communication system, and travel. Process line E track location in a Y screen adaptation. Over cross location screen lines adaptation of sonar and tractions. Different direction, right? All right, so cubical screen lines adaptation of flux over 0, process lines of center, process lines of symbols in 4 settings and rotation surface and cubing and track locations. So you guys have to understand, once you understand the metric, the scales and the balance, the atmospheres and the highways, then you understand your 5 elements in set position. 5th element, all right? Sending that line communication line alterates the system through clocking, all right? Clocking lines going up the stairs. Okay? So set position on high centers. The mining is here in tractions and direct signals, right? This is you in position out of false. This is you in track location already here in tractions through clocking, right? So you have to understand the clocking system because it changes everything through seconds, minutes, and hours in set position. Once you understand the mechanism lines of communication system, all lines of calculation setting and travels, which is already there in the mind of all lines of conceptual locations. Clocking system of 0, clocking system of center, clocking system of 3-track location. Right? Over cross location of screen lines adaptations of flux over screen. All right? Process lines, symbolism lines of track centers into line position location of grounds, set communication to its system. All right? Setting chord lines, upline swing location setting is space lines of anomaly. Outline space. In position, outline space. In position, outline space and track location. Setting communication high center location setting all through satellites. See satellite? There it is in tractions. All right, so basically, once you understand the grounds of your clockings, then you come into your foundations of your system. So let's get into 12 clocking system. Let's get into 24 clocking system, right? So we understand the 12. Set position of 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, and 6. Let's start with that. Okay, so what is 12 to 6? Half pipe. Okay, so what is lines track correlations high center location settings of pi? 3/4. All right, so direct lines of 1 in position over 2, lines of 3 in position over 4, in position center of 5, and line position of 6 over setting. Okay, it's very complicated stuff, right? Because I'm using 12 and the 24 in sequence. So it set position lines of high 24 line cycle, set position location of 0, 1, in position of 0, 2, 0, 3, in position of 0, 4, 0, 5, 0, 6, 0, 7, and position of 0, 8, and let's get into 0, 9 attractions. Okay, now, very complicated stuff because it's a 0 gravity now. Now, processing communication setting puts all communication lines of tractions, all line communication center of your compass that puts lines of center operation, lines of surface and traction. Very complicated stuff for a teleportation vessel, right? Okay, so that this is an eon, chord lines at X lines of 1, process lines at X lines of 4. That's a teleportation vessel that I'm in, right? Now, we all understand basically all lines of grounds into the powers into the atmosphere line. Let's get into the grounds of clocking, let's get into the powers, and let's get into the atmospheres. 3 tractions, right? Ground center lines of 1, power lines of 2, power lines of 3. 3 planets. There's the planets. Signals and rotation surface and tracking system all through traction. Planets, right? Oh, symbolism lines of tracking loss setting. Okay, so line communication system, you're here in tractions and direct signal. That's you, right? Ground center lines of 1, platforms of 3. Okay? Process lines of setting, center lines of 2. Right? Process lines of center lines of 4 and track location. Right? Symbolism lines, coursing system, and lines of travels, grounds, powers, atmospheres, and highways, and line direct signals into modification. Disappeared. See? You guys can't see it yet because it's too strong. There it is. Right? All right, so we change the ground line symbolism across this correlation system and travel. Okay, your pyramid, right? Process lines of grounds, planet lines of E lines, force line, communication line, directing lines, and communication lines of surface and traction. Okay, Symbolism cross-line signals in process communication setting and direction. Okay? So there's so many ways to see yourself through travel. Okay? Always have a 4-line communication system all through attractions, through its intelligence. Boom. There's the teleportation vessel. All right? So I'm constantly in a different vessel, but I'm constantly changing things in its vessel of itself through its satellite. All right? All right. So I'm trying to get you to understand how it basically modifies the system and it retriangulates positional location to a system, how you see the sun and the moon through flux. So getting into that positional location of clockings, you have to understand the clockings of grounds, the clockings of powers, and the clockings in positional location your settings. Metric, scale, balance. Okay? Now when you get into balance, you come into the atmosphere or the ozones. Doesn't matter where it is. Let's say it's in the atmosphere line. Okay, equals lines of ozone. You need an ozone layer, right? 2 platforms of 3 tractions and direct signal. Now the process communication system opens track location in your settings. Okay, 4 lines of signals, process lines of graph communication system all through surface. Clocking system of 1, clocking system of 2, clocking system of 3, and clocking line of platform in direct lines and set position to its calculation. Okay, now change position lines of tractions, all levels as metric core centers lines of travel. Okay, upswing core lines of communication setting of tubing track location to a system. Off their metric meters of travel. So you're processing lines of grounds, processing lines of center, process lines of highest position in the atmospheres, and its highways and direct signals and modification setting to its infinity 8 line rotation surface and location high centers that puts processing communication system and alter track location setting to yin and yang that process communication system all through travel. Okay? So you have to understand the platforms are 5. Okay, so you understand the 12 clocking system. Now you understand the 24 clocking system. So let's set calculation lines and high center interference. Substance location, high center location to its setting. Process communication lines. Let's go intract location, high center position operation center 12, 1, and position of 2 over 3. Okay? Remember, this is Dr. Strange. Okay, you guys have to get out of the 12 clocking, the 24 in that position to get in 36, the 48, the 72, and 144 clocking system. Now you understand that through the grounds, how to use the metric meters, the scales, the balance, how to use the atmospheres, the highways, and position your planetary service of your planets. Every planet has a clocking system. Everything has a kaleidoscope and track location to a system. Okay? Direct lines of flight and travel in point lines of communication. Okay? Process line direct signals in ground lines of surface and set position. Setting course lines of channels, center communication lines, metric cores, metric line communication setting, teleportation. Okay? All screens, directing signals, and screen line adaptations of Pluto and traction. See that? Signal lines, there's Pluto and traction. So there's the interpretation. There's Pluto. Right? Pluto sequence lines of 2 over 2 and lines of 1 signal. Process communications. Directing lines, there's another teleportation vessel and track location to a system over crossing signals. And mechanism lines. Process communication ground lines of surface track location high centers. Process communication high direct signals modification. Right? So I'm trying to get you guys to understand how to use your grounds through clocking, how to use your powers through clocking, how to use your position to your atmospheres and your highways through clocking. All right? So in that position, you're in a box, just a box, right? We have platforms of 3. Okay? You're standing here in tractions of center. Okay? You're in that cubicle screen, adaptations, right? But there's nothing around. Okay? There's no windows, there's no doors, there's no there's no exits in travel. So what do? You get into the mind inception. There it is. There's the door. You go through, right? You go through the door. You open up the portal. You go through the portal. All right? When you go through the portal, you go through the lines of infinity of its portal and track locations. And then you go to higher lines of platforms and communication sending to higher lines of direct signals and modification. Okay? So you invent the door in your mind of alteration. You change the clocking system, right? That changes the times and measures. So getting in that position locations, how to use the 12 clocking system, which you already know, how to use a 24 clocking system, which you already know, but you have to understand how to use a 36, a 48, 72, and 144 clocking system. Because the 144 is the balance of everything. Equals lines of 0, equals lines of 0. 0 equals 144 equals 0, right? Process lines of 3 tractions in direction. Okay, set car relates to the lines of one panel, 4 lines of track centers, 4 line signals in set position. Core lines of data processing, communication lines of cubing, and direct lines into platforms C, line D, E, F, and G. Okay, process lines of indication system, which is all levels, into primer. See the primer? Okay, open sequence, open panel, open tractions. All right, directing doors, 0 lines of 1, 4 lines of 2, 4 lines of 3, 1 lines of setting. There's electrical fence and tractions. All right, sending that communication over cross location setting to Y lines into flux over line tight capacitors, directing ground line symbolism, cross location lines, high direct signals into 144 platform and traction. Okay, over cross locations in setting, 4 line signals into highways and traction. Okay, crossing tubing, set lines at earth line and position of center line to space line of communication. Okay, inline rotation surface and track locations. You guessed it, your satellite. Okay, so you're always going to be symbolizing your tractions at grounds, powers, atmospheres, and highways in a satellite that you are in tractions. But you understand the 3 provisions in metric, scale, and balance. Okay, so if we do this in track location, this is what you're in position of its anomaly in a geological, geographical, and a geographical map in its geometric system in track locations, right? 3 platforms, set position of 1, set position of 2. There's the teleportation. Cross locations, there it is. Boom. That's the vessel you're using. Now there's a reason why we scan centers of its Earth, rotates the system location of surveys and tractions. Look at that, disappeared. It's going too fast. There it is in setting, all right? Now, mechanism lines, screen lines, adaptation lines of surface and tractions. Center course centers, language, you're going to change the platforms over cross locations. Here's another teleportation vessel. So I'm constantly going into different vessels, guys. I'm changing everything through clocking. You guys are trying to understand your attractions through your body already in symbolism, understanding the letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. So if you get a position of 1 center, let's get into 1. All right, here's the process of 1. This is how you see 1. Okay, that's 1, right? This is 1. Okay, now understanding the grounds. There's the grounds. The grounds has its own platforms of clocking system. Okay? Now, you have to understand the ground lines of the power system locations. Then you have to the connection settings of 4 tractions. There's the 4. Now, it's already set up in position lines of travel. Very powerful stuff in position, guys. So 4 mechanism lines and processing communication setting opens all signals into modification lines of 1 traction and 1 direct signals. 1 over 4, 14 over pi. So that's position lines of track communications, setting lines of course, triangulate lines of flux, over screen adaptation of solar sail and track location. Okay? And that's all through 1, all through travel, through clocking. Clocking grounds, powers, and the position of atmospheres into 4 travels, indirect line signals, adding 5 line communications, 5 centers, 5 location, 5 communication, 5 centers, and 5 zero track locations. So that puts lines of platitude and process communication lines of 4 clocking settings. Process line direct signals into ground lines of surface and track locations. Sets lines of 1, 2, 3, 6, 8, and 12 set position. Complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun. Core centers, line track centers into all communication setting. Mega 13. Now, Mega 13 is processing lines of grounds that process communication setting that opens all signals into a time reactor and traction. Hoo-ah, done by equation. It's complicated, guys. All you got to do is understand how to go through your mechanism location to travels, how to direct lines of modification system, all through track location system, and a 4-line angle and travel communication to its position of point graph calculations. Okay? So all you're doing is you're creating higher levels of acceleration of clockings of teleportation vehicles. But you're constantly changing the atmospheres. You're constantly changing the ozones. So you're constantly in a continuous flow. You're all connected to each other through Fibonacci. Setting lines of Fibonacci, lines of 1. Setting lines of Fibonacci, lines of separation, lines of 2, because they're not together, in positions until they come together through traction. Now, once they come into traction, they come into location grid. When they come into location, they come into security line defense. And when they come to security line defense, they come into the grounds, the powers, the atmospheres, and its highways and line direct signals of modification. Hoo-ah. Okay? Process calculation setting over line screen adaptation system all through planets and track locations. All right. So I'm trying to get you guys to understand these things, because once you understand that, then you come into this. Now, the truth and the false narrative is line screen adaptations. You process in one. Let's get in that position. All right, so we process one. All right, let's get in that high signals. Now, getting in that communication, a formula through this equation is coming in high travels. Okay, so we get a one line. We got a position location of 10. We got a position location of 100. And we got a position location of 1,000 attractions. Okay, 1, 10, 100, 1,000, right? Which is a triangle. It's that position, right? So that's how an XT1000 sees everything in plateau, right? Scans its system all through tracks 1, 10, 100, 1,000. Okay? Sets position lines at grounds, powers, atmospheres, and highways, and picks it up and set it. Now, once it picks it up through an orb in line screen adaptations. It has to turn it into its orb and send it in lines of communication to its sending lines of surface. Process communication high center location, where it comes in your outgoing mail. Process lines of 1, 0, 0, 0 in track location. Okay? So, communicates the grounds, lines of surface, and center position. Okay? So, you have to truly understand how to get in triangulation. That's a triangulation of just lines of high position. Sending lines of zeros, 4 zeros in tractions, 3 zeros in tractions, 2 zeros in tractions, and 1. Okay? So, position lines of truth over lines of false. Set lines of interception, line position lines of outerception. Okay? Pi in sequence in line division. Okay? Now that correlates the channels in flux over pi. Gets complicated now. Now we're setting up data lines in process communications. This is the highways, guys. How it's set up, lines, your box frames, and line rotation system, all through your ground settings. There's your highway. All through tractions, all through graph, all through communication. Okay? So, we all understand how to symbolism the data, how to understand the clocking system. Clocking lines of 0, clocking lines of setting in service location system into 4 tractions, 4 settings into 3 line division. That's set 4 over 3 over line and position in high centers. Process lines of 2 tractions into 1 symbolism, 1 traction, 1 platform, 1 line position to its earth and track location. Okay? Now, understanding lines of travel is understanding your data. Process communicates in high location in your system. Kaleidoscopes, screen lines, adaptation lines of surface, routes, router, line triangulation of flux over screen, directing end modification lines of teleportation V lines and screen adaptation. Very complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun. Bring it in close in lines of communication. Okay? So, getting in that position locations, you go through pi lines. Setting clock lines, high center interference of 12, in position 24. Set lines in 36. Now, how do we come into 36? 3 lines of cycles, set position lines of 34. Equals lines of high centers, equal lines of 10. Over screen lines equals lines of 2 and track location. That's how we come into 36. Now, this is a clocking system. Okay? Now, it doesn't have to be in this. It could be anything line communication, but it's all through a map. Mapping sequence all through track location in this settings and travel. Okay? Your mapping sequence inside your system, but you have to understand how to use it through pi line. Let's get into line sequence. Let's get in ground lines of surface of 0, in position of 1, in position of 2 over platform. Setting clock lines of 12 p.m. Okay. Clocking system of 6 p.m. Okay. And clocking system of 9 p.m. Okay. That's provision lines of 3 cycles. All right. Clocking systems of setting, clocking systems of platform and traction. All right. So ground lines of 1, ground lines of 2, ground lines of 0 in platforms over lines of E over traction. So we come in position. This is where we go in line communication to its earth in rotation surface and tractions. Okay, so data sheet 1, platform D, data formation, right? Process lines, E lines of track location, lines of C over D over F in track location. Then we come into the ground line service that process our communication system all through travel. Okay, but it's very powerful when you understand how to go through platforms, all through clockings, all through data sheets, all through program settings. Okay, all through operation of your mapping sequence, all through your coordinates, all through pi, all right? So this is all loves of a clocking system, All right. Clocking system is all lines of communication when it comes into Doctor Strange. This is a clocking system, right? 0, 0, 0. There's a clock. Here's another clock. Triangulation, box. There's another clock, right? Here's another clock. 1 in position over 2 over pi, position of 3 over line, and position of 4 over center of 0. That's another clock. So there's all different clockings that you have to understand through a line communication setting that metrics its scales of its balance. Okay? Into its atmospheres and its highways into your position of your planet and track location. Okay? Crossing lines, high center interference of 1 platform. Track correlates on 3 platforms. Track correlations of 5 platforms. Track location lines of 6 platforms of communication. Line speed adaptations of process calculations. Okay? See what it is? What is it in set position of? What does it look like in track communications? Row graph screens, directing in modifications of what? Towers, radio towers, sonar towers, electrical towers, panel towers, electrical communication towers, central lights of towers and traction. Okay? All through line communication setting, all through platforms of communications. All right? So I'm showing you in position why it's so important to understand clocking settings and all line communications. All right? Setting lines of track interference. Now coming into all levels. Letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. Okay, let's get into the letter L. Okay, so what is L lines of screen adaptations? Well, we bring in the L. Okay, we bring it in 3 centers in set position, right? So it's the primer and direct signals. But everything has a ground, everything has a power, everything has an atmosphere. Okay, so, and everything has a flux. Okay. It doesn't matter how you put it in track locations. Everything has to have a flux and set position of travel. See? Ground centers, right? This is the Earth. All you're doing is basically changing it upside down, upside right. Then you have your platform. So you travel through that in 4 settings of travel. Right? Then you set a structure line division, core center lines of height, position, location, and system through tractions. Directing core lines, platforms, lines of E, F, line of G, and process line to its umbrella, and jump start and track location. Process lines E factors over cross location, screen lines adaptation. Okay. Factors over screen, directing in modification, ground lines of surface and track location. Okay. So you have to really understand the metric, the scale, and the balance of clocking. Okay, because it's all about understanding. Now, coming into 36 clocking is understanding timelines of scales. Okay, so we got into 24 clocking. You already know what that is. 13 is equal lines at 1 p.m. All right, 15 equals lines in set position 3 p.m. All right, so that's 1 over lines over pi. Right, that's 1 symbolism, 1 pi tractions, 3 tractions, 3 platforms. Setting ground lines of surface and line position location setting of flux and travel. Okay, sets core centers into scales and communication setting of primer. I see the primer. 3 centers, core centers, ground lines of 1, ground lines of 0, ground lines of platforms, and magnetic and positional processing. Communicates system all through track location system, all line calculation setting to your pyramid and traction. There's your pyramid. See, it's amazing what you got in position of platforms all through clocking, right? Then you get a clock line screen directing signals in modification, ground lines of core centers, and line communication. Okay? So it's important you understand how to set it up through your data. Okay, process communication of grounds, powers, atmospheres. Now that position location your systems. Same with your symbolism, locations of you. Processing you and communication. All right? You got your grounds, you got your powers, and you got your atmospheres. Okay? This is position locations. All right? Now, if you do this, you can actually see it in track location. Right? So it doesn't matter how you go in position, you just have to understand how to ground your systems where you are. 4 lines. Sending cross line signals across the screen location of 3 lines. Sending cross line communication lines of height location setting at 3 track locations. Sending direct lines of crossing line symbol location system and a 4-line position location of clocking. Directing core lines of height interference at 3 track locations. Clocking lines of 0, clocking lines of 1, clocking lines of 3, and track location. Very complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun. All right? And then we go into the ground lines communication setting and teleportation. There's the vessel, inside center. All right? And then we core lines of communication setting, electrical line grids, sets lines of the earth line, rotation surface, and craft circle. Okay? So you're constantly changing the metric meters of scale and balance of its teleportation vessel. You're constantly changing the colorations of tone in your frequencies. You're constantly changing the metric scales of balance and position location in your system. You're changing weather patterns and core lines of track communication in your clocking system. Clocking centers of 1, clocking centers of 2. Over cross location of screen, adaptation lines of 4. Okay? Mechanism line screen adaptations of 5 and traction. Okay? So inner line, outer line. Inner and outer, right? So you have to extend the inner course to the outer course. Line direct signals in modification lines inception of its line position location and travels that changes all communication system in all communication line screen adaptations of process communication, right? Like I said, you never know where you're going to be until you understand the center operation of you when you bring your perceiving location of its consciousness. So this is what you are positions of and setting. There's nothing in center operation to perceive. Look at that, disappear right in front of you. So I'll do it again. This is the Fibonacci. Okay, this is where it is, right? So it's in its own system of its own operation setting. You know what changes everything? Because you know what governs you. So you have to understand, if it's in its own govern, you're not perceiving anything through consciousness. So what you have to understand of its conscious, of its awareness, once you understand the provisions of you through conscious location setting, you're perceiving everything. Now, when you bring in the center in position, you're connected to all of of what you're bringing in. Boom. But if there's nothing there, you're governing everything that its own system. So it's in its own space, it's in its own time, it's in its own operation. It's running its own system. Soon as you come into intent, that changes the influence, that changes the mind alteration setting to your clockings through Fibonacci, right? So now you're in the center. What do you want to do? What do you want to do? Whatever you perceive brings in intent, influence the mind alteration. What do you want to do? All right, 3 clocking settings, right there, all 3 flux, right? 3 clocking lines of grounds in set position of center communications. Now I'm going to add pi generation lines and solar generation. Process lines, I'm going to flip the switch and track location setting to travel. Okay? That's what I did as soon as I brought something in. But if you don't bring anything in, what are you in positions of? You are just line screen adaptations of all lines of calculation settings of what? I am in track locations. Once you understand the direct signals, you come into the idealized settings. Comes into the I line screen adaptations of flux over screen adaptations of all of us, CPU line rotation, process lines into HP, process communication lines into core, and position location equal lines into orbit, travel lines and position line inception over screen into kaleidoscope screen lines adaptations of flux. Sets communication lines and ground lines communication system. Let's do this again. So here's a box. So if there's a box, but I'm not there, which means I'm not perceiving anything. So as soon as I perceive something, I'm automatically in center of clocking. That's me now, right? So what happens with the box? The box travels in its own platform in position location to its setting, right? So you have to truly understand how this all works in platform communication. So it has a direct line link with you now and travel because there's no separation in travel communications, right? So it doesn't matter what you do in position. Now, in that lines of communication setting, do you want to work with your vessel or do you want to work its vessel with its system of its own that governs its own setting, of its own space, of its own time, of its own monitoring system, of its own its own correlation system, of its own computer operation, own intelligence? You decide, all right? So now you bring in the intelligence. This is what the intelligence is doing. It's helping you out through instructions. There's the teleportation vessel and track locations, right? All right, so getting that position lines, you come into this track locations. Look at this teleportation vessel. Hoo-ah. Okay? This is how intelligence helps you out. Doesn't matter how you look at it. Now, if you want to bring it in line signal, this is what it is in position. There's the intelligence. Brought it in. Oh, energy was too quick. There you go. See? That's what you're dealing with, right? Because you brought something in through intelligence, right? Let's bring in the I division. There it is. There's the intelligence. You see it? Set position. There it is. A seal. See? Coming out of the water in its containment system. Whoa! Now, if you change directions, look at what you come in positions of. High signal location system. Check this out. All calculate and modify in lines of track location system that puts all lines of communication system, you guessed it, your satellite. So you're constantly changing shapes. You're constantly changing letters, numbers, and symbols. You're constantly changing your clockings of your grounds, your powers, your atmospheres, your highways, and your mechanism location settings when you come into your planetary surface of your planets. Now, once you understand how to ground your systems, you understand their metric meters. Once you understand how to balance out your system, you understand the scale communications. Metric, scale, balance. Okay, all three cycles. Okay, all through travel, right? So if there's nothing to perceive, you're connecting to its intelligence by itself. But as soon as you bring in the center, now you're connected to its intelligence. So you work with the intelligence or you work on your own system. So if the triangulation doesn't want to have anything to do with you, what it does is it disappears around you. Okay, and then you're just on your own of center operation. So you are now in charge of you. But the position levels, the actual intelligence, it's on standby in set position. It's still there if you need it, right? So when you come into the mind conception, you want to bring it back in through attractions. This is you through the signal of its travel. You brought it back in. Now, if you want it back in the center, it comes back in its position location of its clocking system of triangulation. Okay? So now you got the collaboration and partnership with the triangulation of its intelligence that governs its own system. So try to understand this, guys, how this all works. Okay, and it clocks the system and it travels in 4 lines of communication, right? So it's constantly traveling in 4 settings, right? Now, once you understand that, let's get into 2. This is 2, right? Clocking lines of 1, clocking lines of 2, clocking lines of 3, clocking lines of 4. 4 clockings of 2. Platform 1, platform 3, platform 6, overclocking of settings of time sequence. Now you change that communication grounds. What do you have in similar location settings? Process communication system, all through track lines of intelligence. Hooah, right? That's ground line, the civil location system, all through travels. Points communication high centers bring in the intelligence information lines of grounds. There's the intelligence. Process lines, center communication setting, all line communication setting lines of service. There you go, face recognition. Change core lines of attractions, indirect signals into modification lines of teleportation. There's the vessel. Process lines of 3, process lines of 4, ground lines of symbolism location system, all through traction. Okay? Change it again. All through track locations. Right? So you always have to have a ground, you always have to have a power, you always have to have an atmosphere. There's another travel, right? Platform here, platform here, platform here, platform here, platform here, platform here. Here's another vessel and travel. See how many vessels you can come in through creation system, all through creating and settings? This process you how to really get in your clocking system. So you're constantly in that position. So this is where you come to 12 steps ahead of schedule. All through unification settings and processing, like all direct signal modifications. Data, lines, position all levels of platforms. 3 lines of communication system. Okay? So setting the grounds. So communication lines, powers. And let's start off with the gist of the atmosphere line. Okay? Grounds, powers, and atmospheres. 3 track line high provisions. 3 core centers into data sheets. Process lines of point lines of graphs of docking and 3 lines of communication. Right? Change communication line direct signals. Okay? And then we come into this cross locations to its moon. Right? Cross line calculation setting in position of 1/2. Set 2 lines of 3 and 3 lines of 4 and set position lines of travel. Okay? Now this is all done through the position location of the Earth and track location system in 2 settings in 1 symbolism and all lines of flux in line communication lines of high travels in 4 direct signals and modifications. There's your vessel. Right? You can't see it, right? Until you see it in traction. Look at this. There's the vessel. Hooah. All right? So you got to symbolize in the ground lines, powers in the atmosphere lines in your highways, and come into your system location, your systems. Planetary surface, right? Okay, so you come into data. This is the data, right? That's the data. That's the point lines. That's your Schumann resonance and ground communications. All right, so we change the core centers of time. Okay. Then we set up the divots. Now the divots over cross locations and setting to a Schumann resonance and travel. Okay. Cross line communication settings alpha, set lines of beta, set lines of mega, and set lines of zeta and track location. Okay. Then we change it again in line direct signals and modification. Okay. XT1000s comes in platform and track location. Right. Scan symbolizes the lines of one platform, 2 track lines, 3, 4 lines of settings, 4 communications, overline signals, cross location lines of 2 track location, high centers of measure. Scales communication system. What do you see in the atmosphere line screen adaptation? A webbing system. Okay, very powerful stuff, guys. A webbing system. All right. So each webbing, each clocking has one system, but they're all connected to each other. One system is all system. Okay, that point lines the graphs of the center communication setting of the Fibonacci screen adaptation of surface and portal. The portal communication high grounds over cross location system all through tractions. Look at that, disappeared. Okay, it disappeared because you weren't ready to see it. Now you're ready to see it, right? So cross lines, core lines into half pipe, 3 cycles, 3 centers and travels. Cross line communication of pi and generates the system all through sonar. Track to its communication lines over 3 lines of flux and track location. Very complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun, right? But I'm just trying to show you how powerful it is once you understand you through your clocking systems of what you can do, right? Doctor Strange. Okay, how's everybody doing so far? All right. So everything that you come across has a ground, power, and atmosphere, and it's highway. It has to, because you're all connected to the same thing through triangulation and settings and position of processing. So again, if you're not processing anything, you are just you, which is nothing is perceived. But as soon as you perceive, what are you doing in position of? You're taking things out, what governs its own system of its own consciousness, of its awareness. But at least you understand its operation of where it's coming from, its travel through its clocking system. If we get a kaleidoscope line and direct signals of 3 settings, okay, clocking centers of 0, clocking centers of 1, and clocking centers of 2. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? Platitudes of grounds, powers, and atmospheres and tractions. Okay, directing lines across location system all through line position. Okay, all right. So process lines of 1, half pipe, indirect signals. This is the rounds, so this is the portals that you go through in traction, right? XT1000 comes out of its sun in modification of its moon. Process over line in direct signals and symbolism inside position locations outside through its equation. Travels, right? Now let's change the track location of its clocking. Let's change the track location to its clocking on a 4-line signal. Let's change the track location to its clocking. Okay? So it's constantly spinning, 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 faster, 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 faster. Okay? But you understand how to use it in all lines of your webbing system. Very complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun. Right? So this is your test on Friday. Okay? All right. This is your position location, your satellite. See, look, your satellite. 3 lines of angles and line position of 4 tractions. Here's the satellite and 4-line position location to its system and 6 lines of travel. There's the satellite. Okay? So the more you go into the mind, the more you get into travel mechanism. Okay? But you got to see it on a 4-line communications, all in setting. All right? See it on all 4 different angles. There's a reason why you have a box. There's a reason why you have a triangle. There's a reason why you have a circle. All different clockings, right? Clocking grounds, clocking power, clocking atmosphere. Okay? Setting lines into torical fields. Okay? Ground centers, primer, and 3 circuits. Okay? There's a teleportation vessel. That's 1, right? Setting triangulation clocking system of 0 into powers into the atmosphere and its highways in 3 tractions. Sets communication lines. Now I'm going to add a different scale, process communication. I'm going to add a line signals and a balance inside position. Then I'm going to outline screen over cross location system all through the circle. So adds platforms and pi and generation screen. There's another vessel. Okay, so I'm trying to get you guys to understand how to use your clockings to change your mechanism location in your travels. Okay, and if we do this, what do we have in provision lines of setting? Right? What do we have? Tornado in 3 cycles and 3 calculations to its grounds and travel. Okay, so you're constantly changing. There's another travel. See, I'm constantly changing travel. Always, 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 always. You're trying to understand how to metric the scale and the balance and how to understand it through the atmospheres in your clocking system to your highways, and understand how to use it through your highways. Then you understand how to use it into your planetary service, how to use lines of communication to your satellites, and understand how to use it in the process communication of your webbing system, which is your Skynet. Okay, this is your Skynet. Okay, you're trying to get it. I know it's complicated stuff, but it's a lot more fun when you just let yourself go and not try to figure things out all through travel. Okay, so all you're doing is it's trying to understand you through your satellites. Trying to understand you through your satellites. Okay, so once you understand that, you come into your satellite screen line adaptation of surface interactions. Satellite here, in set position. It doesn't look like a satellite, right? Until you do this interactions. Set position. Right? So your symbolism grounds the center lines of 1 and flux over 3. Process lines of 6 over line and process communication of grounds, powers, and atmospheres. There's the vessel. So try to understand the ground line symbolism, ground lines of surface over cross location and screen lines adaptation. Okay? There's the teleportation vessel that I'm in through attractions. Okay, guys? And then it goes through its platforms of travel. It goes into its distance of its future adaptations of its clocking system. See? But remember, it's in a 4-line communication setting to travel. It's constantly in lines of different lines of travel and communications and settings, going through different dimensions, different scales, different communication setting, colossal, correlated setting to travel communication setting, out process, communication, interstellar mode, central drive, main drive, hyper mode, hyperdrive. Marking system, light speed. 0 lines of 1 cycle indicates position of power. Power over lines of indication lines, high center location of 4 lines of communication lines of power. 4 set lines of course centers of clocking centers and lines of high setting, 12, 24, 48, and 72, right? 144 is center communication of Fibonacci that puts position lines of high centers of yin and yang and process communication to its infinity 8 and traction. Okay? So once you set up the platform, it's much easier to travel through its mechanism location of its travel. See, there's the travel. Here's the top signal in line position. Here's the bottom signal in line position. Here's the upline signals in line position. So I'm constantly changing into a different vessel, right? Constantly change it into a different vessel. It looks different. It's never the same vessel. It's never the same vessel of communication. Okay, guys? That's all it is in traction. So that's how you get in your clockings. You have your grounds, your powers, your atmospheres, your highways, your modems, your Wi-Fi's, your satellites, and your towers. Now getting into that position locations helps you understand that in track locations, how to go through that lines of mechanism, all through travel. But you got to see it on a 4 line at different angles. So you're setting 4 lines of provisions. This is what you're doing through a box frame, right? Box here. Okay. Box here. Okay. Box here. Okay. And box here, right? So you got 4 different angles of 4 settings. Okay. Now, there's 4 lines of communication in height, center, location, setting, different lines of interpretations in a 4-boxing frame. But what's not in position? You're not in the center. But what does it look like? It's a t-shirt, isn't it? It's a t-shirt, right? Now we just add the arms. Somebody's getting in position, location, of settings, realism, and attractions. Then I add the circle lines, and then I add the body to screen, adaptations. All laws of attraction. Okay, guys? Then I add the neckline and screen adaptation to its facial recognition. All through a box. Okay, guys? I morph myself into configuration of face recognition, of pattern recognitions, all through 4-box frames, all through clocking. Okay, clocking lines of 0, clocking lines of 24, clocking lines of 48, and clocking lines of 144 traction. Right? So the clocking system is all lines of communication sending to grounds. Okay, you see the center communication? Look, set position of 1, 2, and 3 platforms of communication. There's the holographic system. See how I changed the platforms and setting lines of 2 tractions and 2 platforms of 3 settings. Right? Process lines of grounds, powers, and atmospheres and highways and track communication lines of travel. Right? Let's change it again. Different lines of communication setting of tubing. Okay, cross line settings, over cross location setting of sonar, echo chambers, communication with black holes, indirect signals into dark matter, and line rotation surface and traction. Okay, all process communication to grounds, powers, atmospheres, and highways and communication. There's the highway above the system. Very powerful stuff, isn't it? Okay, guys. All through a 4-box frame and configuration of face recognition settings. So you're constantly changing your clocking system of your 4-box or triangulation box or anything in our track communications. All right. Same with the triangulation. This is where you come in line position, how to use it through the NEWS. Okay. N. What is N? What does it mean to you? New setting. Existing, width of system, news, whatever it is to you, and that's what it is in tractions. But what you have to understand is how to come into different levels of teleportation. All through your grounds, powers, and atmospheres, right? Ground simulations of clocking lines of high centers. Platform C, platform D, platform E, platform F, platform G. Then you go into platform 0, 1. Okay? Now you come into line position over lines at the 1, 1, 1. Okay, so all it is data. You're processing data. Okay, point lines, docking here, docking here, docking here, docking here, docking here. Right? So you're clocking here, 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 and you're clocking here in platform. Okay, XC1000 comes in, right? Travels here, sets lines, travels here, sets lines, travels here, sets lines, travels here, sets lines, travels here, set lines, and set position. So every time it sets a line, it opens up its portal, and portal of communication system all through track lines and generates and screen lines adaptations of its highways and traction. Okay? And then you can see it from the ground lines up and travel. Okay? So I'm trying to get you guys to understand how you come into correlation setting in that process communications, how to create it through your webbing system of light and dark. Very complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun when you get lines of vision all through traction. Okay? Always, always, always never see anything in a face view. Never see it in a box. See it in the grounds, powers, atmospheres, and its highways and traction. This is the teleportation vessel. Okay, now try to stand that. I'm going to set a 3 lines, 3 lines, 3 lines. Check this out. Metric, scale, balance, teleportation. See it? There it is, right? Now I'm going to go metric, scale, and position. Just metric and scale. Because I already know what the balance is. So this is what it is. This is another flux of a teleportation. Different lines, but different teleportation, right? Then I'm going to go into 0 gravity in position of a portal. That 3 lines of core centers of clocking system all through flux and travel. See the intelligence? Okay? So this is what it is in line position location of the system, all through calculations. Processing this, guys, is very powerful traction. Okay? Get you in that line signals in process communications. Opens all signals and modification grounds. Okay? All through traction. Okay? So you're constantly changing metric, scales, and balance of everything at travel. Look at that. Look at that. Teleportation outside and a teleportation inside. So what's controlling the system? You. Through the mind. You through the mind. Okay? Say core lines, a 3 clocking system, 12 lines, 24, set calculation lines in a 4-line rotation surface in position of routes and routers at core lines at highest interference as 6 and 9 in travel. You see it? Then you go through your platforms and set position to another portal of communication system. So you're constantly changing everything in track communication setting and 4 lines of flux. See? It went too fast. Couldn't see it. Always see it and never on a flat surface. Always see it in a line position location to a system. So when you're looking at a teleportation vessel or how you're looking through a box or a triangulation or a number, this is what it is. There's 4 lines of numbers, right? This is 1, this is 1, this is 1, and this is 1. That's all 4 ones, right? So it has the grounds, it has the powers, and it has its atmospheres and traction. And when you put that together, you come into its vessel of communication. Right? And you are in the center operation, monitoring its system on its computer system, of its frame and track communication system, all through lines of window-frame communication. Okay? Platforms your data process communication settings all through lines of the earth, and inhibits the location system all through lines and mech locations of travels and platform communication. Okay? Direct lines at height. Screen lines adaptations, all of the data processing cube centers. Process lines of data sheets and process communication setting all through flux. Okay, all through I division, right? But if I change it this way, what do we have in tractions? Different formula, different equations. If I do it this way, what do we have in tractions? Different formula, different equation, right? So a box is never a box. A symbol is never a symbol. A letter is not a letter, and a shape is not a shape. So yes, you get in that position location, and it basically gets you to understand how to use it. We understand how to use 12 and 24. Now, a 36 clocking system, okay, you have 36 lines. Now remember, you're in Doctor Strange. You can do whatever you want. You can add a Fibonacci line as screen adaptation. Sets core lines of communication lines of 3 centers, 3 lines of communication, add 6 lines of traction. There's the clocking, right? Set position, but you have to have this together, right? So that's a 3 tractor. See, there's the teleportation vessel right there. See it? There's the vessel. All right. So you get a triangulation line and cross communication to a system. All right. Mechanism line. There's 2 lines of. See the 2 vessels? You have a stealth and a triangulation setting. There's the stealth and triangulation, right? Process lines of grounds. Process lines of center. Process lines of symbolism location setting to another vessel of communication. There's another vessel. Vessel within a vessel within a vessel of communication of clocking. All right. And that's all through 36 clocking. All right. So your clocking system is okay to modify how you use your finger points. Finger point lines of 1, finger point lines of 2, finger point lines of 3, finger line positions, and thumb lines of indication. Set lines of A track, lines of B center, C lines equals lines of D. D equals lines factors over E. Platforms lines of X. Xbox, set lines of data formation lines, execute. Process lines, run system. Cross lines calculation setting. Systematic lines, okay. And then we come to E factor, inline screen adaptations of process lines of planet setting and travel. Okay, now if I change it this way, what do we have? Different formula, different equation, right? If I change it this way, we have different formula, different equation. See? Everything that you see is travel. Everything you see is travel. It has to. So mechanism lines of highest interference, 3 lines of cycles, 2 track locations, 1 provision lines of highest interference, so there's another vessel of communication. 2 vessels of communications, all through formula, all through equation, right? Through a clocking system. All right, so what do you have in line screen adaptation? 2 unification settings. Okay, mechanism lines, core centers, line communication, high center, location of Pluto, lines of Jupiter, and Neptune, and cross location of 3 cycles. Process communication line, high triangulation, the cross line communication lines of time sequence, time calculation. Okay, direct and core centers, process communication, high set location system, all through track location system, all through mechanism. Okay. See another vessel? I turn it upside down, turn it upside right. Right? Vessel on vessel on vessel on vessel on vessel. Okay, guys? Now 48 is understanding time sequence. You have 48 clocking system times lines of 10 equals lines of position over 2. Sets core lines of high centers of 50 in track communication system. Time sequence lines of 1. Sets calculates lines of 10 over screen. Directing lines of 16 line position location to a setting. Okay? Now you get position lines of perimeters, set lines of center, and operation setting of 48 flux location lines equal lines of 10 attractions. Symbolism lines, track to communication setting of its vessel. There's the vessel of communication. There's the vessel right there. Boom. Right? Travel point lines of graph, ground lines of 1, 1 lines of 2 equals lines of 2 equals lines of 3. Process lines of DX lines of 1, 4 lines of signals, process communication. Direction! Woo! And I can do the cross-line condition settings over cross-line signals, process lines of indication system, another line communication setting, and a vessel communication system, all through tractions. 2 vessels in communication. All through tractions, all through clocking. All through the grounds, all through the powers, all through the atmospheres, highways, and set position. All right, now that's through a 40 clocking system. Now, setting core lines of 72 is a computer line. Now the computer line rotates as high position location it travels. Pi generation lines of 3 tractions and 3 settings. Okay, but you got to see it in a 4-line different line communication lines of angles. Clocking lines of 1, clocking lines of 2, clocking lines of 3. Okay, so in that position lines of grounds, powers, atmospheres, and highways and traction. So that's position location system all through your pyramid and track location. There's your pyramid, right? So, and then you got the XT1000s coming in line signal. Platforms of 3 settings and divergence of allegiance and alliance coming out. All right. So when they come out, the line screen and adaptation system, they open up different portals and change the clocking system of time sequence of time panels that change the portals and communication system all through parallels and tractions. Change all calc and modify and line screen adaptations of flux and communication of time sequence. Okay? So they upswing their line screen adaptations of portals and go in different directions in flux line screen adaptations all through tractions. Okay? Sets communication setting. Here's another vessel in communications. Grounds, powers, and atmospheres line screen. Sets communication system. There's the vessel communication. All right? So I can keep going on and on and on, but you have to understand how to get into that position location of travel, right? So you're constantly changing your position locations, your metric meters, your scales, and your balance. You're changing your vessels. So you have to understand what your thoughts are doing, your actions, and your emotions, guys, because it's constantly changing frames. And the more you understand that through attractions, the more you understand that through provision. Okay? Knowing exactly you're 12 steps ahead of the game and 0 steps back. If you're 12 steps ahead of the game, you're already in predetermination of future adaptation that's already happened in track lines of clocking. But if you're not in provision, you're in the headspace. You're not in the mind of empty space. So there's so many ways to understand how to have that position of a clear mind is its own conscious, of its own system of mind, of conception. Okay? So. All right, guys, but you really need to get in this in line screen. All through line position locations. Setting lines and communication system. This is your Skynet and your webbing system. And a 4-line signals and track locations. All levels of different directions. One direction is all direction of clocking. Right? So it's kind of like this. Okay, you're here. This is you. That's you, right? You've already clocked yourself in 3 settings already, right? So you know where you're going to be here, you know you're going to be there, and you know you're going to be over here in traction. That's 3 clockings, right? So that's 3 doors in track locations. Okay, you go through those doors, and then you go through another portal in communication. And then you go through another portal, another communications. And then you go through another portal, another communication. Doctor Strange. Okay, guys? And once you understand that, this is how it changes your reality in 4 lines of sectors, vectors, and quads. Sectors, vectors, and quads of communication. And 4 lines of angles. Okay, guys? So understanding that through provision, you have to truly understand how to use that in set position. Okay? All right. How's everybody doing so far? That was fun, wasn't it? We're going to stop there. because it's very confusing if you understand your clocking settings, especially when you come in your binaries. Higher lines communicates the system. Basically, it's understanding how to see things ahead of schedule in that position that's already set up in location setting for you in predetermination system location attractions. All right. See you in 5.